I sat at my kitchen counter, swirling the last drop of coffee in my mug, watching the sunrise paint streaks of gold across the city skyline. The morning light glinted off my silk blouse, the one I always wore when I needed to feel like I had it all together. My phone buzzed on the marble countertop, a small, insistent vibration that I almost ignored, but something told me I shouldn't. It was a message from my sister. "Can we talk?" Family stuff. My chest tightened, a familiar mix of dread and defiance settling over me. I had avoided them for years, ever since that day they kicked me out for buying that $1,200 junk house instead of choosing family like I was told. The words still echoed in my head, sharp and bitter, but they couldn't touch the woman I had become. I ran my hand over the edge of the counter, feeling the smoothness beneath my fingers, and let out a quiet laugh that was more ironic than amused. Did they really think I would crumble all these years later? The thought made my stomach flutter, not with fear, but with a faint thrill of control. From the window, I could see the renovated houses across the street, reminders of how far I'd come. A lump formed in my throat as memory surfaced. The cold words, the slammed doors, the nights I spent planning a life they thought I didn't deserve. Yet here I was, calm, composed, successful, but carrying every scar like a secret badge of honor. And now, after all these years, they wanted to talk. It was a late summer afternoon when everything changed. I was 23, full of dreams and a stubborn streak that would have made anyone sigh in exasperation. I had saved every penny from part-time jobs and freelance gigs, tucking them carefully into an envelope labeled My Future. The envelope had become my talisman, a small symbol of freedom that I clutched whenever my family's disapproval loomed too close. I remember the exact moment I told them. My parents, my older brother, and my sister were sitting around the dining table, plates half cleared, laughter in the air until I dropped the words like a stone. "I bought a house," I said, trying to sound casual, almost proud. $1,200. It needs work, but it's mine. The room froze. Their expressions shifted from mild amusement to sharp disbelief. My father's jaw tightened, my mother's hand clenched the edge of her napkin, and my sister gave that look, a mix of pity and judgment. "You've lost your mind," my mother said. "Why would you do something so reckless? We told you to choose family, not some abandoned shack." I felt my hands tremble, a lump rising in my throat, but I refused to back down. I wanted to scream, to tell them that their idea of family didn't mean locking me into their world of safe, predictable choices. I wanted to defend the envelope with my life. Instead, I swallowed my pride and smiled through the ache, feeling each heartbeat hammer against my ribs like a warning drum. My grandmother's voice floated back to me, from the letters she used to send before she passed. "Courage doesn't come from being fearless, darling. It comes from acting even when your heart shakes." I held her words close that day, rolling them over in my mind like a mantra. The argument escalated. My brother laughed, saying, "You're on your own if you think this is smart." My mother's eyes were wet with a mixture of anger and sorrow. By nightfall, they had made their position clear. I was no longer part of their immediate plans, no longer safe in their world. I gathered my things, the envelope pressed against my chest like a fragile promise, and left. That junk house wasn't just a property. It was my first act of defiance, my declaration that I would survive and thrive on my own terms. And though I had no idea how, I knew this house would be the first step toward the life I was determined to build. The first night in that $1,200 junk house, I stood in the middle of the dusty living room, the moonlight slicing through broken blinds. The floors creaked under my weight, the walls were streaked with decades of neglect, and the air smelled of mildew and old paint. I should have been terrified, but instead, a spark of exhilaration flared in my chest. This house was mine, all mine, and I would make it beautiful. I spent the first weeks cleaning, scrubbing, and patching, my hands raw and my back aching. I had never held a hammer before, let alone wielded a saw without fear of cutting myself. Each night, my fingers blistered, and I would trace my grandmother's words in my mind. "Courage comes from acting even when your heart shakes." That mantra carried me through sleepless nights of measuring, painting, and planning. I quickly realized I couldn't do it alone. That's when I met Clara, a seasoned realtor in the neighborhood who had taken one look at me and the crumbling property and said, "You've got vision, kid. I'll help you make it real." She became my mentor, teaching me the ins and outs of real estate, negotiating deals, and managing contractors who often doubted I could handle a project. Clara's belief in me was unwavering, and for the first time in my life, I felt someone saw potential where my family saw foolishness. The early days were exhausting. I balanced my full-time job with nights at the house, often returning home with paint on my blouse and dirt under my nails. There were moments I wanted to quit, times when self-doubt whispered that I'd never be good enough. But every time I felt myself wavering, I'd look at the peeling wallpaper or the sagging ceiling and imagine what it could become. Then came the first small win, a buyer for one of the renovated rooms, paying more than I ever imagined. The feeling of handing over the keys was intoxicating, a mix of pride, relief, and disbelief. Slowly, the money began to grow. I reinvested every dollar, flipping houses, fixing interiors, learning every detail about construction, design, and market trends. My nights were long, my body tired, but my heart lighter with each completed project. All the while, I kept my family in the dark. Social media told a carefully edited story, a few modest updates, pictures that hinted at normalcy, nothing to reveal the empire I was quietly building. It was my secret, my silent victory, and the thrill of it fueled me even further. By the time I bought the second house, then the third, I had transformed that first $1,200 wreck into a stepping stone for a life I never dared to dream of. Every screw I hammered, every paint stroke I applied, every long night I endured built more than just homes. They built me. And when I stood in my first fully renovated property, sunlight streaming through sparkling windows, I realized I had done something my family never thought I could. I had created my own path to success, on my own terms. I hadn't heard from my family in years, and honestly, I liked it that way. But when I received the message from my sister, I knew they were coming, not for a casual visit, but for closure, or maybe to gawk at the failure they believed I was. I chose to meet them at the newest property I owned, a completely renovated townhouse in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement. The doorbell rang, and my stomach gave a curious twist, not from fear, but from the anticipation of their reactions. I opened the door to see my mother, my father, my sister, and my brother standing there, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. I smiled, the corners of my lips curling just enough to hint at amusement. "Welcome," I said, voice calm and steady. "Come in." They stepped into the foyer, taking in the clean lines, the polished oak floors, the sunlight spilling through large windows. My mother's hand flew to her chest, my father's jaw tightened, and my brother exchanged a glance with my sister that spoke volumes of surprise and confusion. The walls were adorned with framed prints of my projects, the living room carefully arranged to showcase both elegance and personality. The scent of fresh flowers and warm wood filled the air, a subtle reminder that this was not the home of a reckless 23-year-old, but of someone in control, someone who had transformed chaos into triumph. They lingered, silent, absorbing every detail, before I led them to the living room. I gestured toward a sleek coffee table, where a small binder rested. "I thought you might like to see how that $1,200 junk house turned out," I said lightly. I kept a record. Their eyes flicked over the pages, slowly registering the numbers. Multiple renovated properties, profits far beyond what anyone in that room could have imagined. Then I let the silence stretch, long enough for them to realize that this wasn't a fluke. I leaned against the window, arms crossed, letting my gaze travel over the stunned expressions. "Since I left, I've bought and renovated 7 houses," I continued. "I've built a business from nothing. The first house you mocked, that $1,200 shack, it was the start of everything. And now I own multiple properties, employ several people, and manage a portfolio worth more than you ever thought I could achieve." Their mouths opened, closed, words failing them. My mother's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. My father's expression was unreadable, a mix of pride, regret, and shock. My brother finally muttered, I didn't realize. I let them stew for a moment longer, watching the discomfort, the recognition that the little girl they thought incapable had not only survived, but flourished. Then I smiled, gentle but unmistakably firm. You wanted to see me fail, and I understand why. But what you don't get is that I didn't need your approval. I needed courage, and I found it. I paused, letting those words sink in. The room was heavy with emotion, the air thick with disbelief and, finally, awe. This wasn't just a reveal of money or property. It was a reveal of resilience, of a woman who had turned exile into empowerment. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt the full weight of triumph, unshared with anyone but myself until now. The silence in the living room stretched long enough for me to feel the shift of power, the shift of perception. They had come expecting to see a struggling, defeated version of me, and instead, they were confronted with a woman who had not only survived but had thrived beyond their comprehension. For the first time, I wasn't pleading for acceptance or validation. I was in control. I leaned against the edge of the window, folding my arms calmly. I'm willing to help, I began, letting my words hang in the air like deliberate brushstrokes. Their expressions flickered with hope, but I didn't rush. Compassion didn't mean weakness. But things will only change if you're willing to change too. I started with my brother, the one who had mocked my first house. You want to be involved in my world? Then you need to stop underestimating people, especially me. Respect isn't optional, and if you want my help in pursuing your own business ventures, you'll commit to learning, listening, and supporting rather than criticizing. He shifted uncomfortably, nodding slowly, clearly understanding the weight behind my tone. Then I turned to my mother. You have to let go of control. I know you think protecting us is love, but suffocating doesn't help anyone. You need to support your children's choices, even if they aren't what you expected, and stop using guilt as a weapon. Her eyes shimmered, guilt and awareness mingling, and I felt a pang of empathy. Change is hard, but it's possible. My father and sister both leaned forward, awaiting my instructions. No more judgment based on fear, I said firmly. You each need to pursue your passions, take responsibility, and stop holding the past over me. If you want to be part of my life, it will be on terms of respect, growth, and honesty. I could see them processing, realizing for the first time that the old rules no longer applied. I had survived the rejection, built my empire, and learned the hard truth. Love without boundaries was useless if it meant sacrificing my life and happiness. Now, I could offer support, but only with conditions that would heal the family while keeping me whole. I paused, letting my eyes sweep the room, resting on each of them in turn. I care about all of you, I said, softening my voice, but I won't let the past dictate my future. This isn't about punishment. It's about transformation. You want to share my life? You have to grow into people worthy of it. They stayed silent, absorbing the weight of my words. The energy had shifted completely. No longer was I the exiled, naive girl they had dismissed. I was the architect of my own life, offering guidance and opportunity, but on my terms. Every word I spoke was infused with compassion, yet edged with unyielding firmness. By the end of that conversation, I could see it, the beginnings of understanding, accountability, and maybe even genuine respect. I had given them the choice, and for the first time, the power truly rested in my hands. Weeks passed after that meeting, and slowly, I began to see the change. My mother started calling more, not with criticism or guilt, but with genuine curiosity about my projects. My brother sent me a business proposal he'd been working on, asking for advice instead of mocking my efforts. Even my sister began volunteering at a local renovation program I supported, eager to understand the work that had once seemed foolish to her. I watched these shifts with quiet satisfaction, but also with reflection. Every step of this journey had been painful, every slammed door, every mocking comment, every night of isolation, but it had shaped me into the woman I had become. Strength wasn't just about building houses or accumulating wealth. It was about carving a life from adversity and refusing to let anyone dictate your worth. Late one evening, I returned to the first house I'd ever bought, the $1,200 shack that had been the starting point for everything. The walls gleamed with fresh paint, the floors shone under soft lighting, and the air smelled of lavender and promise. I ran my fingers over the edge of the dining table, worn smooth by years of work, and I smiled. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind once more. Courage comes from acting even when your heart shakes. That envelope of savings, the first bricks I had laid with trembling hands, had been more than a house. It had been a declaration of independence. It reminded me that every moment of fear I had faced had led to triumph, every small victory building towards something larger. I had learned that family could change, that love could grow when boundaries were respected, and that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but rather acknowledging the journey and embracing growth. I stood in that living room, feeling the quiet power of a life fully claimed. And as I gazed out the window at the homes I had renovated, the streets I had transformed, and the life I had built with my own hands, I whispered a final truth, one that carried both pride and peace. I chose myself first, and in doing so, I created a world where family can follow, but only if they're ready to walk beside me.